It's a Monday installment of Locked On Grizzlies. The month of June has begun. The finals have been set. Indiana Pacers, Oklahoma City Thunder over the next couple of days. We're going to take a look at the finals from a Grizzlies perspective, starting with Indiana. We talked enough about the Thunder for a little while, at least for one day. What can the Grizzlies do to help the Pacers in their pursuit of beating the Thunder? Plus, Triple J versus Siakam, Ja versus Haliburton, all that and more on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, your host for this episode, Joe Mullinax, flying solo once more. DeMichael Cole wrapping up that trip that if you if you watched, listened to our wonderful Friday edition of the show, you know that DeMichael was getting a nice long weekend trip. Having a good time. Very happy for him. Well-deserved. He'll be back with us on tomorrow's show. You've got me for the next 30 minutes talking Grizzlies basketball here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google, literally anywhere that you get podcasts. Make DeMichael and I a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. We are so grateful that you do so. If you are an everydayer, welcome back. So happy to have you here. Make sure you're hitting us up in the comments. Let us know on X where you listen to us from, what you enjoy about the show, what we could do better with the show. We had a pretty successful Friday installment. Usually happens when I have an armchair GM trade moment. I thought it was a good deal. Some of you agreed. A lot of you did not agree, which is totally fine. It's a free space, whether it's the comments, social media, at Joe Mullinax. Hit me up, be a part of the discussion here on Locked On Grizzlies. The NBA Finals are set. And if you are a small market, hello, welcome to Memphis, Tennessee, you should be thrilled because this is the brainchild, allegedly, of my co-host, DeMichael Cole. According to my co-host, DeMichael Cole, the brainchild of Adam Silver. This is parody at work, right? This is the Oklahoma City Thunder, the Indiana Pacers. This is two small markets, no Los Angeles, no Boston, no New York, no Miami, not even a Dallas. This is a matchup of two teams that are not considered blue bloods in the NBA, although I would argue that the Indiana Pacers have had some historical success, obviously before the NBA even, but especially in the last 30 years. While the Pacers have never won an NBA Finals, and since the Thunder do not claim the Supersonics finals when they moved as a franchise, that means that we will have a first-time NBA Finals champion one way or another. Small markets unite. Small markets rejoice. It is possible. You can do these things, right? You can win at the highest level of the National Basketball Association without being a coastal city that has wonderful weather. Nice to know. I am intrigued by these finals. Not because I think the Pacers are going to win. I'll give my official prediction on the series on Wednesday's show. But I do think that the Pacers have a skill set that can create issue for the Thunder. And the way that I'm going to try to explain this is through the lens of the Grizzlies. So just for the next few episodes, so you can follow along with us here, we're going to preview the finals in a couple of different ways. Today, we're going to talk about it through the eyes of the Indiana Pacers within the Memphis Grizzlies framework. Obviously, Indiana and Memphis don't have as many direct matchups together, so we won't look at it that way. We'll take the overall macro view of the key cogs, the key players, and that's how we'll preview the finals there. On the other end, obviously, tomorrow, we can dive a little bit more deeply with the Thunder, having seen them most recently and the dominant effort that they put forth in their sweep against the Grizzlies. But again, we're going to start with the Pacers. We're going to start with Tyrese Haliburton, which really grinds my gears. If you're an everydayer of Locked On Grizzlies, you know that I like Tyrese Haliburton because he's a wrestling fan like me. He's a big WWE guy. Shout out to Tyrese Haliburton for that. But I struggle with the idea that Tyrese Haliburton is better than Ja Morant. If I'm being an impartial observer of basketball, analyst, if you want to call me that, I cannot honestly say that Tyrese Haliburton is not better than Ja Morant in this moment. Tyrese Haliburton is absolutely better than Ja Morant in this moment. Doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. And they are two different players. That is important to point out. Haliburton has a pretty extensive bag in terms of basketball skill as a creator off the dribble, as a creator of offense for others. But his most unique piece, Ja can obviously do those things too. But his most unique piece, what really makes Haliburton head and shoulders in front of Morant at this stage of their careers, is the assist to usage rate reality. I think that is what makes Haliburton unique and what makes him elite. Obviously, he scores the ball well, has an impressive floater, but Ja can do those things too. Maybe not as well as Haliburton, but the edge is not as wide. The assist to usage rate, however, that is a significant difference between Morant and Haliburton. I'm using cleaning the glass for my stats as I normally do. Assist to usage rate and ratio. This is the assist rate compared to usage rate. How often did a player get an assist given how often they had the ball? For Ja Morant, that is 1.02. That was the rate, and that's 38th percentile in the NBA. That is below average. Tyrese Haliburton, 1.51, 97th percentile. And then you compare that to the turnover rate. If you are an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies, if you're not, hello, welcome for the first time. Hopefully you stick around, subscribe at all those different places I talked about, anywhere you get a podcast. I talk a lot about turnovers on this show. Tyrese Haliburton's turnover rate this past season, a career best, 8.4%. That is 95th among combo guards in the National Basketball Association. He is one of the best in the NBA protecting possessions. Ja Morant, 14.1%. I think the Pacers have a chance in this series, a much better chance than the Memphis Grizzlies had. And a major reason for that is Tyrese Haliburton's ability to not just create offense for his teammates, but to also protect the basketball. He is like a super Tyus Jones for my older fellow 1980s babies. Think back to if you were a fan of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze. And I'm sorry that I'm dating myself here. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, go look it up on YouTube. It's phenomenal. Okay. Shredder becomes Super Shredder in that movie, right? Too much ooze, gets too big. Again, quick wrestling note. Kevin Nash actually played Super Shredder. I'm going too far off base. Super Shredder is bigger than Shredder, right? Tyrese Haliburton is super Tyus Jones. The way that he can score, obviously better than Tyus, even with the floater game. It actually isn't a comparison that's far off when you think about it. But he's better than Tyus at these things, and he is elite in terms of that assist to turnover rate, even though his usage rate is so much higher than that of Tyus Jones. And Tyrese Haliburton's 25.4% usage rate, much lower than Ja Morant's 34.7 during the regular season. But that turnover number is seismic. And the assist to usage rate number is seismic because people give credit for Ja being this great creator of offense for others. And he is 88th percentile among true point guards in the NBA, 35.5%. But Haliburton was 38.4%. He was better than Ja. And this is where Haliburton thrives. Don't even need to talk about the three-point shot, which Haliburton clearly has better than Morant. But Ja can be that great point scoring in the paint player without the three-point shot. Obviously, we want him to have that. But the place where their games overlap the most, and the reason that I think Indiana has a better chance than others are going to give them credit for, is where Haliburton lacks the athleticism of Ja. I don't think anybody would ever say that Haliburton is the same athlete on par with what Morant can do. That passing, the decision-making. He is going to be able to interpret in real time and in the lead up to game 1 on Thursday through watching film, studying the Thunder. He's going to see where these lanes get collapsed because of the length of the perimeter defenders of the Thunder. He is going to be able to understand much more clearly because it's how he sees the game, where the ball can go, where it can't. And he is also going to be willing to make a choice to hold off on a pass or to dribble through and reset a set or try to find space in penetration beyond dribble penetration. You can make penetration of a pass. You can make penetration with your movement off ball. Haliburton does those things in a different level than Ja Morant does at this point. And those are things that I'd love to see Ja lean into in the future. Again, the three-point shooting, that's too easy to say. Ja's a good passer. Haliburton's great. How can Ja mirror that? It's decision making, both in and around the ball when he has it and when he's off the ball, and how he helps get to the next move. Ja is a basketball genius, but applying that physically more effectively and more efficiently. That's what makes Haliburton great. That's what makes Haliburton better than Morant right now. And that's how Ja, I think, can improve his game and catch up pretty quickly to what Haliburton brings to the table. Hit me up on X. Let me know in social media. Hit me up in the comments. Do you agree with my statement? Again, if you're an everydayer, if you followed my work, I'm not a huge fan of saying that about Tyrese Haliburton. 2 years ago, it wasn't true. Right now, it's hard to say it isn't true, or that it's true that Ja is better than Tyrese. I don't think you can say that. Do you? Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X. That is what I'm most concerned about. That's what I'd love to see Ja really lean into in the future. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will be discussing another comp, Triple J to Pascal Siakam. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered where all my money go? Where did it go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app. Monarch Money is a complete financial command center. You track all of your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing money and you start building your wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I spent on food delivery. It was ridiculous. Now, I budget smarter, I save more, and I'm able to get my wife in on the fun. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. So Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., and Pascal Siakam, that's where we're going to go next with this conversation. And if you use the Ringer's player ratings, okay, for the interest of full disclosure, obviously not getting all of my information from this, but that is what I am basing this off of. The best player between the four is Tyrese Haliburton at 19. Jaren Jackson Jr. is 22, and these were updated as of April 15th. So obviously a month and a half of basketball has been played. So as of April 15th, these were the rankings. Jaren Jackson Jr. was number 22. Ja Morant was number 29, and Pascal Siakam was all the way down at number 38. So Tyrese Haliburton was number 1 among the 4 that we're discussing on this episode. Ja was number 2, or excuse me, Jaren was number 2. Ja was number 3. Siakam was number 4. And I do think that Siakam has reminded everyone what makes him great in that New York Knicks series. It was really difficult for the Knicks to be able to match up with Siakam's ability off the dribble, the way that he's able to score the ball, his unique combination of size and just overall basketball acumen. His outside shot has improved a lot. And I do think that's important to point out because that's part of the conversation regarding Siakam. It has to be. When you think about Jaren Jackson Jr., part of the conversation at 6'11", his unique ability to shoot the ball. Same concept here. Siakam is really good at shooting the basketball, and he's gotten better over his time in the NBA. And that makes this Pacers offense go. It is a significant piece of the Indiana offensive experience. Because initially in his career, he didn't really shoot the three at all. That was not a part of his game in any way, shape, or form. The fact he's a 39% three-point shooter over the last 2 seasons, that is significant. And truth be told, that is better than one Jaren Jackson Jr. We always say that Jaren can be one of those spacers. Jaren can be one of those guys that teams have to respect from beyond the arc. But how true is that, especially compared to somebody like Siakam? Siakam, 39% over the last couple of years. Jaren shot 38% this past season, basically right there with Siakam. But he was 33 the season before that, 33%. So Siakam has a larger sample size of being, or at least with Indiana. So Siakam has a larger sample size of being able to be this spot-up three-point shooter. And I think a piece of that is the Haliburton effect. Tyrese Haliburton being the threat that he is to create offense, Siakam not having to be the main option. And I think that Jaren, with Ja on the court more consistently, hopefully, knock on wood, Jaren will benefit from that. At least he theoretically can benefit from that. But when I say getting Jaren to Siakam's level, it isn't necessarily as a scorer, because Jaren this past year scored better than Siakam did. Jaren, in terms of his overall offensive output, and again, shout out to Cleaning the Glass, 118.6 points per shot attempt. Not bad. Pascal Siakam this past year, again, a player not viewed as good as Jaren Jackson Jr., 119.6. So the scoring is comparable. The scoring is in the same realm. Where does Siakam have Jaren beat? Siakam has Jaren beat, much like Haliburton has Morant beat when it comes to the passing game. I've talked about Jaren Jackson Jr.'s passing here, there, and everywhere. Okay, he needs to be a better facilitator of offense. He's still better than he was 2 or 3 years ago, but he regressed in this area. He was at 13.3% in terms of his assist percentage in 2023-2024. The season that just concluded, he dropped all the way down to 10.3%. Compare it to Siakam, 16.7% 2 years ago, roughly, a little bit more than that. 15.5% over the whole lifespan of this season across 2,500 minutes played. Jaren only played 2,200 minutes. So Siakam was on the floor more. The passing. If you watch the Pacers play, I think that gives them an advantage compared to what the Grizzlies were capable of against this Thunder team. The two best players for the Indiana Pacers are much better facilitators of offense. The ball moves through them, around them. The pace that they play with, in addition to the way that they move the basketball, that is very different from the Memphis Grizzlies. So while Jaren Jackson Jr. may be a better all-around player than Pascal Siakam, I don't think anybody would argue against that, or maybe some would, given the fact he was just the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. But if you compare the entire body of the regular season, Jaren was a better player. But Siakam is a better offensive facilitator. And this could also tie into the issue of scheme, right? How much does the Taylor Jenkins firing, the way that LaRoche's offense was installed, Noah LaRoche, Tuomas Isillo, the tweaks that he'll make as the new head coach, having been a part of that staff and seen what worked and seen what didn't work, Jaren thrived for a vast majority of the season until he didn't. How do you maintain that growth? How do you help him rediscover that offensive facilitation? Because you don't want to take away from his ability as a scorer off the dribble. He's one of the better isolation scorers in the NBA, much less among bigs. So he has that capacity where it's almost Karl Anthony Towns-esque, where when he gets downhill, he can be unguardable. But the issue for Jaren, that we've talked about often, is he's too predictable. Tries to get to the left hand. He'll fight through a double team. He's not actively looking to pass the basketball once he gets into that motion. Teams can collapse on that. It makes them too predictable. Siakam's not predictable, at least not as much as Jaren. And Haliburton certainly is not as predictable. Obviously different positions, but you understand my point. What Siakam brings to the table that Jaren does not, offensively at least, is that capacity to, he can be a threat to find an open shooter, a cutter off of a drive. He has his eyes up downfield, to use some football vernacular. He understands movement. He knows where his guys are going to be, and he's willing to make that extra pass. And again, that's an advantage for the Thunder compared to what the Grizzlies were. The Grizzlies were broken. They had injuries, all these sorts of things. They weren't that broken. We're going to talk about how in Game 3, the Thunder looked like the team that was broken. The Pacers are in a position where they can amplify their strengths in a way that the Grizzlies were not able to do so. And because of that, we are able to take the two teams and separate them. No, the Indiana Pacers are not a part of a more dominant conference. They were in the Eastern Conference. They come out of the Eastern Conference. They weren't expected to be there. The Oklahoma City Thunder were expected to be exactly where they are. But Siakam is the reason that Indiana is able to thrive. Haliburton is good, and Haliburton would be good regardless of his situation. But Siakam is what gets them to the level of contender. Siakam can create. Siakam is a mismatch. Jaren can do the same thing if he's willing to. But the key is he has to find that space within his game and within his development. It can't just be about scoring. It has to be, what is the best play? The best play is not always going to be me putting my head down, trying to get to the free throw line. Sometimes I have to find where that double is coming from and kick the ball out. That is a significant part of the game that Siakam has that Jaren doesn't, at least not right now. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will finish out this episode talking about a way that Memphis can help the Indiana Pacers get competitive in their series with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Stick around here on Locked On Grizzlies. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, closing out this episode of the show on a Monday. Thank you so much for being with me. It is truly appreciated. And we are talking about the Indiana Pacers in this game, or in this podcast, I should say, and in the upcoming game 1 against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the Pacers are a better team than the Memphis Grizzlies right now. That's not really earth-shattering analysis, right? They're in the NBA Finals. Memphis isn't. And if the Memphis Grizzlies were in the Eastern Conference, I don't think they would have gotten past the Knicks, much less these Indiana Pacers, who obviously just got past the New York Knicks. But what I do think the Pacers can learn from the Memphis Grizzlies, we've been talking a lot about the Grizzlies learning from Indiana. Rick Carlisle is one of the best X and O's adjustment coaches in the entire National Basketball Association. And I think that he is wise enough and smart enough. If he doesn't do it himself, he'll have staff that will, to sit down and break down every playoff game that the Thunder have played. And I think that he would be wise to watch the Nuggets, because people are going to say Denver is the team that gave the Thunder the most trouble. That's what folks are going to say. They probably already have said it numerous times. But what did the Denver Nuggets have that Minnesota didn't and that the Grizzlies didn't? Nikola Jokic, the best freaking basketball player on the planet. No offense to SGA. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is the MVP. But Nikola Jokic is still the best freaking basketball player on the planet. So all bets are off. There's some things that Jokic does that nobody else on the planet can do. And you kind of just got to take that with a grain of salt and say, that film's impressive. Jokic is the man. Obviously, the Timberwolves series, you have Rudy Gobert. There's some differences in schematics and differences in lineup, matchup possibilities. Plus, you're looking at a point guard in Mike Conley, a scoring wing, and Anthony Edwards. It's not a clean comp. I would argue that the Grizzlies are an interesting comp for the Indiana Pacers for the reasons that I've been articulating this entire episode. Ja Morant is not Tyrese Haliburton, but they have similar overlapping skills. Pascal Siakam is not Jaren Jackson Jr., but they have similar overlapping skills. You compare some of the Indiana Pacers bench, Nembhard, Nesmith. You compare the other key cogs of the Pacers machine, Miles Turner, who's going to have a huge role in this series against the Thunder. He has to be one of the best players on the court for the Pacers to pull the upset. But the top two for Indiana, Haliburton, Siakam. Top two for the Grizzlies, Ja Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. And what I will never let anybody forget is that before Ja Morant got undercut accidentally, not on purpose, still happened, before Ja got injured being undercut by Lou Dort, the Memphis Grizzlies were up by 26 points in Game 3 against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And what is the adage that everybody always says? Or not everybody, but a lot of people. A series doesn't start until the road team wins. OKC won the first 2 games in their house. Memphis was well on their way to winning Game 3. Does that mean that the Grizzlies would have upset the Thunder? No. Oklahoma City is a better team. We've talked about that ad nauseum here on Locked On Grizzlies. We're not going to go down that road again. But especially in that first half, I think there are pathways and passages that Rick Carlisle and his staff could view to see how the Grizzlies competed in those moments. It wasn't obviously over the span of a series. The Pacers are in a better position to do that than Memphis was. But how they were able to compete, how Ja Morant got to his spots, how the Grizzlies played in transition. That's another reason why it's an interesting comp. The Grizzlies and the Pacers both wanted to play fast. 2 of the fastest paced teams in the entire NBA. How did Memphis attack this Oklahoma City Thunder team? The Pacers might have better pieces to do it with, especially in terms of depth, once Brandon Clark and Jalen Wells especially were out. That all may be well and true, but Ja Morant to Tyrese Haliburton, Jaren Jackson Jr., Pascal Siakam. playing with pace. Check out that first half of game 3. Did Ja Morant really have the Oklahoma City Thunder figured out? Maybe not. Maybe that was just a really confident guy displaying some confidence in the wake of a pretty significant defeat. Or maybe it was one of the best basketball players on the planet acknowledging that he saw something in OKC that was flawed in transition defense when Ja was able to get downhill. A lot of Ja's made shots, and the shots made in that game were corner threes, shots on the floaters. Tyrese Haliburton, we've talked about throughout this episode, an experienced, really strong shooter of the floater. That's one of the ways he put the New York Knicks to sleep on Saturday night, was with that floater. We talked about Pascal Siakam being a better three-point shooter now. That's still not the strength of his game. That's not what you think about when you think Pascal Siakam. You think his creativity off the dribble as a big. You think the mismatch angle. He still can do those things, but you're finding an open shooter. If you got guys like Thomas Bryant, like he did against the Knicks, knocking down threes, all bets are off, man. All bets are off. But again, it's Siakam to Jaren. It's Morant to Haliburton. It's the pace that Memphis played with. I think there's a space where you can take not everything, because again, Zach Edey is a different piece there. Miles Turner is not Zach Edey, right? It's important to point out. You have some differences in what is around those two key cogs. But Haliburton is going to make decisions at a different rate and in a different plane than Ja Morant did with the ball in his hands. He just is. Can Haliburton get to those spots is the question. Because he's going to be dealing with a level of athleticism on the perimeter that he is not used to. And the Thunder are going to be able to throw it at him consistently, rep after rep, minute after minute, quarter after quarter. Can he get to where Ja got to because of Ja's athleticism and be able to make the decisions and the plays with the ball in his hands that Ja was not able to make for whatever reason? Supporting cast, poor decision-making on Ja's part on the court. It's pretty clear that Haliburton has the leg up on Morant in that space, as we talked about earlier in the show. But he's going to be able to physically get there. That's where coaching comes in. They have to help Haliburton get to those levels through screens, off-ball movements, secondary facilitation, lots of different angles they can take. How do you continue Siakam's momentum coming out of the Knicks series against an OKC team that has Hartenstein and Holmgren? Caruso's probably going to defend Siakam a lot. We've seen Caruso defend numerous bigs, including Jaren Jackson Jr., throughout the postseason. Can Siakam get to his spots? Can he continue when it's variety of opposing defenders finding his looks? And can he find not just his looks, but those of his teammates off the dribble if there's a collapse in the post? If somebody rotates down, blitzes out on a hedge, on a screen, can Siakam make that additional pass that Jaren Jackson Jr. cannot at this stage of his career make? And can the Pacers get out and run? They destroyed Karl Anthony Towns in that way in the series against the Knicks. Can that fast-paced offense that both the Pacers and Grizzlies have pushed, can the Pacers execute it better than Memphis did? The answer is probably yes. So again, are the Thunder going to be favored? Absolutely. Should they be? Yeah. Are the Pacers the underdogs going into game 1 on Thursday? I think so. But if they connect to their Memphis Grizzlies counterparts, if Haliburton can continue to be a better version of Ja in terms of creation of offense, if Siakam can be a more versatile Jaren Jackson Jr. in terms of passing the basketball and being that movement of the ball as opposed to the isolation scorer only, and if they can execute pace without turnovers, if the Nuggets could hang around, why can't the Pacers? Might be OKC in 6, might be in 7, might be in 5. I'll give my prediction later on in the week. But I think there's a lane that the Memphis Grizzlies could provide if the Pacers are wide enough to check it out. And I think there's a path to improvement for both Jaren Jackson Jr. and Ja Morant, that if they're willing to watch these finals and the playoffs that happened before it, they could learn from the tape as well. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Now that you've made Locked On Grizzlies your first listen today, for your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board Show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Google, literally anywhere. Comment, hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. Let us know what you are thinking about the show, and hopefully you become an everydayer and you're with us each and every time that an episode drops. Tomorrow, we'll be doing the same kind of style, but from the Thunder perspective. Obviously, break down game 1, 2, 3, 4, how the Thunder beat up on Memphis, how they can apply that energy to the Pacers, and then later in the week, giving our official finals previews, and obviously getting a little bit more Grizzlies specific. But again, the finals are fresh, they're new. Hopefully you enjoyed this look at the Pacers through the Grizzlies prism and perspective. I'm Joe Mullinax. Thank you so much for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Make sure you're right back here tomorrow. Until then, stay safe. We'll catch you next time. See you.